All right, now joining us to discuss what has been happening in the DRC following the killing of 2 South African soldiers, we're joined by the African Defence Review Director, Darren Olivier. Good evening, Darren. Thank you very much for joining us on The Full View. Firstly, your reaction to the latest killing of the 2 South Africans by the M23 in the DRC.
Good evening. I think this really shows the extent to which these troops are vulnerable, and they are not sufficiently, I think, equipped or protected to deal with the kind of threat level that exists over there at the moment. We have a very well-equipped, M23 rebel force supported by Rwanda, which has access to, obviously, not only just regular mortars, but according to reports, even guided mortars. And in return, the force is not sufficiently able to really deal with this. So I think the real issue here is to ask the question of, well, why was the force not deployed and given the means by which they can be successful? One of the examples given is, Karen?
No, you can continue and share the examples with us.
Oh, yes. So one of the examples is that one of those killed died while waiting for an ambulance to come from, one of the local clinics. This should not be happening. At the very least, there should be access to a aerial medevac, some kind of helicopter support, and ideally as well, they should have deployed with their own field hospital rather than having to rely on the DRC's clinics as well. So really, this is a case of, again, an unnecessary death, most likely because of taking far too long to reach proper medical care.
But these were issues that were flagged a bit earlier on. Just at the beginning of the year, these were issues, whether it be the lack of the military aircrafts, it be the lack of proper ablution facilities. We've talked about that. We've also talked about the sophisticated weaponry that M23 is getting from other countries that the DRC doesn't have. So why continue with the mission?
That's an excellent question. And certainly these are issues that have been raised since the very beginning. There have been many warnings by various experts speaking of these issues, these deficiencies, and the relative sophistication of M23, of course, with support from Rwanda. So yet, until to this date, nothing much has been done except to reinforce the numbers of the group there, pushing it up to the mission's maximum size of about 2,500 troops or so. In terms of why not withdraw now, it's quite tricky because once you're committed, and once you've now effectively gone in as part of SADC, and after the DRC invoked the SADC Defence Pact, if South Africa now were to suddenly withdraw, it would be seen as if it has been effectively chased out by M23, and it would therefore be a blow to South Africa's credibility and strategic strength on continent. I would say, first of all, this mission should never have been launched in this current form. If they were going to do this mission, it should have been much better supported, and they should have ensured that certain aspects of the financing were in place long before. But now that it's in place, it's very hard to suddenly withdraw without losing face, losing credibility, and suffering probably a strategic loss. Therefore, all attention, I think, must be made towards 2 things. One is how to reinforce the mission now to ensure the continued security and success of the mission. But 2, how to unravel this entire mess in the DRC in, seeking a diplomatic solution. Because it's very clear that this won't be solved through military means alone. These can help, they can provide some security, they can provide some space to negotiate. But ultimately, there has to be a political solution to this problem. And that's going to mean lots and lots of diplomacy between, Kinshasa, Kigali, and other countries and other capitals in the area.
All right. So reinforcement, but beyond this, some sort of dialogue, because Rwanda at some point when they were in South Africa did say they want to be in conversation around what is happening in the DRC. But there's another dynamic. Was it not ill-advised for the DRC government to call for the withdrawal of the UN peacekeeping mission MONUSCO in hindsight?
Oh, yes, I believe so. Now, certainly, MONUSCO was not as effective as hoped, especially after its own budget was cut. And you only really had one aspect of MONUSCO, which was the Force Intervention Brigade, that had the mandate to actively go after rebel groups. However, the rest of the mission, the so-called framework brigades, played a very valuable role in at least keeping certain areas at a low level of violence, providing some element of stability in those areas. What we're seeing now is, as elements of MONUSCO withdraw, the DRC military is not generally able to fill those gaps. So yes, I strongly believe that withdrawing MONUSCO was the wrong call. I also believe it was the wrong call to ask the East African Community Force to leave as well. So certainly there have been many, I think, questionable choices made by the DRC government in terms of a strategy. I think they over-relied on the capacity of the DRC military, which was recently, it's recently received a fair amount of new equipment. Some units have received additional training, but overall it still doesn't have the strength to be able to take this on its own. And I think this is an area where, as SADC, and specifically as Africa within SADC, there should have been a much greater interrogating of the plan and the outcomes beforehand.
I suppose not all is lost. This is the point now when they can start having those conversations around reinforcement and the political solution to deal with what's been happening in the DRC, because it's been far too long. Darren, thank you very much for your time this evening. That's African Defence Review Director Darren Olivier speaking to us.